Good Erev Shabbos to everyone. Big thank you to Avi Ratner for sponsoring the Shabbos Kollel this morning. In gratitude to Boker Raton Synagogue for providing all the learning opportunities and shiurim. I don't want to take time now. We'll have the chance to introduce Rabbi Glatstein several times over Shabbos, but to welcome him on behalf of our Dr. Yitzchak Belazon Beis Medrash. It's a lot of excitement. Rabbi Glatstein is one of the biggest marbitei Torah in the world in America today. What a schus it is through so many mediums, not only locally, his community, but also super popular on Torah Anytime, leading tours around the world. And when someone is popular, you know they're representing the authenticity of Torah, that they practice what they preach, who they are, that they're sharing a Torah shel chesed, a Torah that speaks to people's neshama, and not only to their head, and that's having an impact on their lives. So it's a great schus. We welcome him and his family here this Shabbos, and grateful to all those who are making it happen. I apologize, I have to run out to a bris, and I can't hear, but Baruch Hashem, it's being recorded to be able to listen to later. Please join us as well. Special oneg for men tonight, tomorrow morning, giving several drushas, tomorrow afternoon, shalashidus as well. Lots of learning opportunities over the course of this whole Shabbos. Without any further ado, please rise and join me in welcoming Rabbi Glatstein.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I apologize.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the warm introduction. It's an honor to be here in BRS, which is a center of Jewish life and Torah for not only the Florida community, but everyone around the country knows, this is where it's at. So let's jump right into it. I want to begin with a very brief introduction that there are many approaches to Chumash. Very often we'll look at a parsha and we'll say, what could we learn from this? What's the message? How could we apply something to our everyday lives? But there is another approach to Chumash, very interesting approach, and that's an approach in a certain sense which was invented by none other than the Parashas Drachim, the Parshas Drachim, where he says that, we have two avenues of understanding Torah. We have the world of Musar and Machshava, and we have the world of Halacha. And sometimes we don't take Halacha and apply it to the narratives of the Chumash. And what the Parshas Drachim invented was, let's take the Halacha as codified in Shulchan Aruch, sourced in the Talmud, and let's see if we could apply it to the actual narratives of the Chumash. And that was an approach that the Parshas Drachim, so to speak, innovated. And many of the Sfarim followed in his suit, namely the Meshech Chachma, the Ragid Shavar, and many other Sfarim. And let's try to apply this approach to Parshas Chayei and the episode of Eliezer being sent to look for a wife for Yitzchak Avinu. Because we need to identify what exactly is Eliezer's role over here. Who's getting married? The Kala is Rivka. The Chassan is Yitzchak. Where did the wedding take place exactly? Where was the Chasana hall? In the palace? In a hall somewhere in Lakewood? Where did they get married? And what's Eliezer's role? Eliezer apparently is the shliach, is the agent. Is he marrying Rivka to Yitzchak? Is he what we call shliach lekedushin? Where did the actual kedushin take place? Okay, so there's an interesting tosfos in Masechta Ksubos where the Gemara is discussing something called Birchas Erusin. We know we make Birchas Nesuin, and we make Birchas Erusin. Birchas Nesuin is the Sheva Brachas. Birchas Erusin is Baruch Atah Hashem Eloheinu melech haolam al ha'arayos v'asar lanu es harusais v'hitir lanu es hanesuos lanu al yedei chuppah v'kiddushin. Baruch Atah Hashem. That's Birchas Erusin. How many people do you need for Birchas Erusin? Do you need one person, 3 people, 10 people? So we say you need 10 people for Birchas Erusin. So the Yerushalmi discusses, how many people do you need for Birchas Nesuin? The Yerushalmi says, for Birchas Nesuin, you need 10 people. Where do we learn it out? Boaz gathered 10 people when he married Rus. Okay, so from there we learn you need 10 people for Nesuin. And how many people do you need for Erusin? So Tosfos says that based on the Gemara in Ksubos, you need 10 people for Birchas Erusin. Where do we learn that from? Eliezer. How do we know that? Because he took 10 camels. And there must have been 10 people on the camels. So from there we learn out, you need 10 people for Birchas Erusin. Now friends, if Tosfos is learning that you need 10 people for Birchas Erusin, that must have been that Eliezer made Birchas Erusin. Now if Eliezer made Birchas Erusin, you know what else that means? That there was Erusin. You can't make the bracha if there's no Kedushin taking place. So apparently, when Eliezer handed Rivka the jewelry, he effectuated a marriage between Rivka on one side of the world and Yitzchak on the other side of the world. That's called Shliach LeKedushin.
They don't have to be together?
They don't have to be together. It's better for Shalom Bayis. Okay? They don't have to be together. Shliach LeKedushin. Okay? There's such a concept. Shliach LeKedushin. Eliezer must have effectuated the Kedushin. But we have a bunch of problems with that. Problem number one. Are you allowed to marry a woman if you never saw her? If you don't know what she looks like, you're allowed to marry her? The Gemara says in Kedushin Daf Mem Aleph Amud Aleph, Amar Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, Asur la'adam she'ikadesh es ha'isha ad she'yirena. It's prohibited for a person to marry a woman until he sees her. Why? Shema yiraba davar maguna. He might notice something eventually that he doesn't like, and he won't like her, and he'll violate v'ahavta l'reacha kamaycha. You hear this? You hear this? If you love your wife, you're makayim a mitzvah d'oraisa v'ahavta l'reacha kamaycha. If you don't, you're violating, among other problems, v'ahavta l'reacha kamaycha. So the Gemara says you're not allowed to marry a woman until you saw her. So how did Yitzchak get married to Rivka through Eliezer if he never saw the woman? They never saw each other. In fact, when Rivka comes back and she's headed toward Eliezer and she sees an imposing man, she asks Eliezer, "Who is this guy?" And Eliezer says, "This is your husband, this is Yitzchak." Obviously, she had never seen him before. Can't imagine how he would have possibly seen her. So the question is, how was Yitzchak allowed to marry Rivka through this shlichus? Asur la'adam l'kadesh es ha'isha ad she'yirena. In fact, there's an interesting Gemara in Baba Basra, which is, impossible to relate to something like this in our times, where the Gemara compares Eoiv to Avram Avinu. Eoiv, so to speak, boasted. He would never contemplate, he would never gaze at a basula, at a woman he wasn't married to. And the Gemara says, Afar lupume de Eoiv, dust into the mouth of Eoiv. Because Eoiv implies he wouldn't look at another woman, but his own wife he would look at. And we know Avram Avinu said about his own wife, "Hey, I've never seen you before." Lo yadat ki isha yifas mara'at. That Avram said he never even saw Sarah. So the Marsha asks, Avraham never saw his wife? But then Avraham violated Asur la'adam l'kadesh es ha'isha ad she'yirena. Then Avraham was in violation of the principle that you're not allowed to marry a woman until you see her. So the Marsha answers that of course Avraham saw his wife. They were related. He saw her before they were married. That's how he was allowed to marry her. But once he married her, he had no reason to look at her anymore. That's what the Marsha says. And he had not seen her since the marriage. And that's why he says, I didn't realize you're still so beautiful. So then the question is obvious. If even Avraham had to look at Sarah to marry her, how was Yitzchak allowed to marry Rivka through Eliezer if he never saw her? Now, it's interesting. Halacha l'maisa, are you or are you not allowed to marry a woman if you never saw her? The Shulchan Aruch paskins that if it's efshar, you're not allowed to marry a woman until you see her. But what if it's efshar? You live on a desert island, and the only way you can make this happen is you send a shliach to marry the woman to you. Is it permitted under a difficult circumstance to marry a woman if you've never seen her? If it's efshar, if it's impossible, it's permitted. So maybe you'll say, look, Yitzchak had no choice. God said you're a carbon oila. You can't leave the land of Israel. There are no shidduchim in Eretz Yisrael. You got to go to Aram Naharayim. You got to go to New York or something and find a shidduch. So he had no choice. He can't leave the land. This is the only opportunity. Okay, but that's question number one. How was Yitzchak allowed to marry Rivka if he never saw her? Question number two. Was Eliezer given specific instructions? Go to Aram Naharayim and marry Yitzchak to, Sprinza Yenta. Here's her name, here's her address, go to this lady and give her the money. What kind of instructions did Avram Avinu give? He said, marry her to a woman from my family. In the world of shlichus, this is called shlichus stam. Stam meaning the shliach has discretion who he could marry the man off to. He's not given specific instructions who to marry him to. Are you allowed to appoint a shliach to marry you off to an undesignated woman? It's asur. You're not allowed to do that. You know why you're not allowed to do that? Because what happens if the shliach dies? Then you're up the creek without a paddle. Because if the shliach dies and you don't know who he married the guy off to, this man is now stuck for the rest of his life. He cannot marry anyone in the whole world. Maybe the woman who he married the guy off to is a relative of the person he wants to marry now. So the halach is, it is prohibited to marry, for a shliach to be appointed stam, because you never know, he might die, he may have married you off to some unspecified woman, now he can't marry anybody. In fact, it's very interesting. On the Haggadah Shel Pesach, we say in the Haggadah, Tseu lamad ma bikesh Lavan harami lasois leYaakov Avinu. Look what Lavan wanted to do. Paroi lo gazar el al zacharim. Paroi only decreed on the males. The Lavan bikesh lakar. He wanted to destroy the whole Jewish people. How did he want to destroy the whole Jewish people? What did he want to do? What does the Haggadah mean? Is that hyperbole? That Lavan wanted to destroy the whole nation? Many Mefarshim say that Eliezer was sent to be what we call a shliach stam, to marry Yitzchak off to an undesignated woman. Lavan tried to kill Eliezer. Chazal tell us, Rashi brings on the pasuk, Vayusam lefanav, that he placed before him. Rashi says Lavan tried to poison Eliezer. Now, by the way, how do Chazal know that Lavan tried to poison Eliezer? One is the kri of the word vayusam is vayisam, sam, like a language of poison. Another explanation, the Vilna Gaon, if you look in the Hakdama of BRS Hagra, the Vilna Gaon says, Chazal say, Kol ma she'amar bal habayis aseh chutz mitzeh. When you're a guest in someone's house, that's why I don't like to be a guest. Because when I was a young boy, I grew up in Flatbush. You heard of Flatbush? It's a country in the northern hemisphere. I used to walk to here, Harav Avigdor Miller, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha. So he used to talk about, when you're a guest in someone's house, you're a slave, because the guy's saying his old, rusty Divrei Torah that he said last time you came and the time before. It wasn't good the first time, and it's not better the second time. And you have to politely nod and smile. Wow, what a ga'oinus you're saying. And then you're stuck at his table listening to his stories. We don't know shahaya or shalayhaya. Anyway, so the rule is, when the host tells you to do something, you're halachically obligated to oblige. The question is, Lavan and Besuel tell Eliezer, come, before you talk, let's eat something. And what does Eliezer say? No. I'm not eating until we've sealed the deal. How is he allowed to do that? Isn't the halacha that you're obligated to listen to your host? Yeah, but not if they want to kill you. Not if they're trying to poison you. So Eliezer realized there was something up over here. So he was able to turn them down, because even though you're supposed to listen to your host, you don't have to give up your life to listen to your host. In any event, yes?
You said he's a shliach stam, but didn't Eliezer ask for a simon?
Eliezer asked for a simon, yes, but that doesn't change the fact.
He had a purpose.
True, but Eliezer is looking for some guidance, like who he's supposed to marry her off to. But in terms of the original appointment, we'll get into who exactly appointed Eliezer. You're not allowed to do that. You can't send a shliach off just to marry you to an unspecified woman. What happens if he died? Which Eliezer almost did, had he not been smart enough not to drink the arsenic in his oranges. Yeah.
But if you have to do it in front of 10 people, what's the difference if the shliach dies? We'll know who he married the person off to.
Good. You don't have to do the marriage in front of 10 people. You don't have to do the erusin in front of 10 people. You have to do the birchas erusin in front of 10 people. So there's still a concern that the marriage may take place privately, and then you say, well, where's the minion who was at the birchas erusin? Oh, you mean, what about why aren't we worried that the...
No, if he dies and there's 10 Eidim, we know who she's married to, or he's married to.
So apparently you have to say that the marriage would still be effective without the bracha. In other words, let's say you don't make a bracha. Are they married? They're still married. Maybe they're missing the bracha, but it would be an effective marriage. What? It's not effective? The bracha doesn't make the chalois kedushin. The kedushin is chal with or without the bracha.
No, you don't even put a ring on, you don't do nothing.
No, you need the ring. You need nesinas
How
kesef.
do you get a ring? She's over there and he's on the other side.
Eliezer takes the ring that Eliezer bought at Macy's, and he gives it to Rivka on behalf of Yitzchak. Yeah. But he's asking, but what are we worried about? The minion will tell us, exactly what happened. Okay, let's move on a little bit. Here's another problem. Who's the shliach exactly? Eliezer's the shliach? Who's Eliezer? He's an Eved. He's an Eved Kanani. An Eved Kanani could be a shliach? He's not Jewish. He can't be a shliach. Shulchan Aruch says that you can only use a Yisrael or a man to be a shliach. Anyone who's not what we call b'toiras kedushin cannot effectuate a marriage. How could Eliezer be a shliach on behalf of Yitzchak Avinu? In fact, it's interesting. Rabbi Shua Leib Diskin discusses this question of how Eliezer was able to be a shliach on behalf of Rivka. So Rabbi Shua Leib Diskin suggests that Avram Avinu must have had a word with Eliezer and said, listen, you're my erstwhile Eved, but I need to appoint you to be a shliach. I am hereby freeing you and rendering you a full-fledged Jew in order for you to be able to be a shliach l'kedushin. Avram Avinu must have freed Eliezer to enable him to perform this kedushin. But Rabbi Shua Leib Diskin asks, are you allowed to free an Eved Kanani? Anybody know? What's the halacha? Could you just free an Eved Kanani? The Gemara says in multiple places, Kol ha-meshachrer avdoi oiver ba'asei shenemar la'olam b'hem tavoidu. You're now to free an Eved Kanani. It's an avera, it's a violation of the mitzvah saseh of la'olam b'hem tavoidu. So Eliezer cannot have just been freed by Avram Avinu. So says Rabbi Shua Leib Diskin, there are rare instances where you are allowed to free an Eved Kanani. Anybody remember? If you need a minion, yeah, he'll need to be circumcised, but you're not even allowed to circumcise. You're not allowed to free him to circumcise. If you need a minion is a mitzvah rabbah. Or if, let's say, you have a chatzi eved, chatzi ben chayren, we have an eved that's half free, half slave. So the guy's stuck. He can't marry anyone. He can't marry a regular Yisraelis. He can't marry a shivcha kananis. So the Mishnah says, what's the guy supposed to do? He's not going to get married, but the world was created to procreate. Shenemar l'sheves yitzara. So that means we see, in order to propagate the world, in order to allow children to come into the world, you're allowed to free an Eved Kanani. Likewise, in this circumstance, in order for Yitzchak to be able to get married, Avram Avinu was authorized to free Eliezer. So, says Rabbi Shua Leib Diskin, Avraham Avinu must have freed Eliezer. So Rabbi Shua Leib Diskin asks, but what if Eliezer won't be successful? So he says, Avraham Avinu must have freed him with a stipulation. He must have said, Eliezer, here's the deal. If you find a wife for Yitzchak, you're free. And if you don't find a wife for Yitzchak, I'm not freeing you. It's al tinai. But there's a big question with that. Because while Eliezer is headed toward Rivka, he is called Eved Avraham. But what should he not be called on his way back to Yitzchak? He should no longer be called Eved Avraham because he was freed. And yet the Torah continues to refer to Eliezer as Eved Avraham on the way back from the Kedushin. And now finally, question number 5. Yeah?
Perhaps another possibility is the Orach Chaim
asked the question, why did Eliezer daven to Hashem? If he figured Avram Avinu already davened to Hashem. So he poses that he davened so that he would be a good shaliach, a worthy shaliach, and that would be successful in his mission. So
Good. So Eliezer davened that he should be a worthy shliach, but still, Yitzchak never saw the girl. So how was he allowed to do that? Yitzchak appoints him to marry him to an unspecified woman. He wasn't allowed to do that. Eliezer is not Jewish. How could he effectuate a kedushin? So all of these problems are still difficult. And then finally, what's interesting is that Yitzchak meets Rivka. And, the Netziv observes that throughout Chumash, Sarah is always telling Avram off. Get rid of the kid. I have a tinus against you. Sarah is always giving Avraham a piece of her mind. And Avraham doesn't know what to do. And God said, listen to her, listen to her, listen to her. Rivka says what to Yitzchak Avinu in the Chumash? Not one word. Not one word. And the Netziv says that's the power of first impressions. Avram Avinu and Sarah, they grew up together, their family. Sarah wasn't afraid of him. Rivka, the first time she sees Yitzchak Avinu, Rivka's 3 years old. Yitzchak Avinu is coming back from Har HaMoriah, wrapped in his talis and tefillin, and Rivka sees this imposing tzaddik. She always had reverence for him. She never told him anything. Everything she did, behind his back. In any event, Yitzchak sees her. It says he brings her into the tent. Vayikach es Rivka. Vayikach. What does the word vayikach mean in a halachic sense? Ein kicha ella kinyan. It's kedushin. Vayikach. Yitzchak took Rivka and he did the kedushin. But we just said that Eliezer was the shliach to marry Yitzchak to Rivka. That means the kedushin already took place in Aram Naharayan. And they already had Birchas Erusin. So what kind of kedushin is taking place when Yitzchak meets Rivka? These are 5 questions on the narrative of the marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka. Number 1, Yitzchak never saw her. How is he allowed to marry her? Number 2, you're not allowed to send a shliach to marry you to a woman, stam. More importantly, we didn't say the most powerful question. Who exactly appointed Eliezer? Who appointed him? Oh, Avraham. Really? That's an interesting concept. Are you aware of this concept? Really? You could make a shliach to marry off your son to whoever you want? There's a concept like that in Judaism. There's a concept like that in Halacha, that you could appoint the shliach to marry your son off to somebody. There is no such concept in Judaism that a father is authorized to marry off his son. You're authorized to marry off your minor daughter, not your son. So who appointed Eliezer? In the Torah, all we find is a conversation between Abraham and Eliezer, but that is not a concept in Halacha.
Rabbi?
This gentleman, yes.
Do any of these halachic issues become important in an answer that this is obviously pre-beginning of the Torah?
Again, so like I started, one may think that the narratives of the Chumash predated Sinai, and maybe what happened is not governed by, what we call the Mosaic law. Maybe what happened is not governed by Shulchan Aruch, okay? And there's a big question whether the Avos were considered Jewish or they're not considered Jewish, okay? That's the famous question in the first chapter of Parashas Drachim. Were the Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov considered Yisrael, or are they not considered Yisrael? This is a famous machlokes between the Ramban and Chachmei Provancia, where the Ramban says, where the Chachmei Provancia says, nah, they only were considered Jewish l'chumra. And the Ramban's opinion is that from the time of Avram Avinu, they were considered Jewish, not only l'chumra, but even l'kula. Okay, so this all presupposes that all the halachas that we have today, the Shulchan Aruch, equally applied to the Avos HaKadoshim. And Chazal do say, Avraham Avinu was Mekayim, even Mitzvahs D'Rabbanan, even Eruvei Tavshilin. Yes, so in a certain sense, this is academic, but it's not academic because there's a long-standing tradition from many Rishonim that the Avos abided by even the minutia of the halacha that we have today. Yeah.
Maybe they didn't really get married until the Vayikach. By that time, they'd seen each other already.
Okay, so if you're going to say, like this young gentleman, that it's permitted, that what happened was Eliezer just fetched Rivka, and then Yitzchak says, yeah, okay, I approve, and he married her, and that's why it says Vayikach. That flies in the face of the way of Tosis that we started with, that Eliezer was a shliach l'kedushin, and that he did birchas erusin. What's he doing birchas erusin if he's not marrying them? If he has to bring her back, and he's going to marry her in Aram Naraim. So right, that's why we started with Tosis. That Tosis is assuming the erusin took place when Eliezer gave the jewelry to Rivka. Okay, so somebody gave me a sefer. The name of the sefer is called Darkei Shalom. It's from a Rosh Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael, Rav Shalom Schechter, and he suggests the following very interesting approach. Okay? The main question, I would say, is how in the world could Avram Avinu appoint a shliach to marry off his son? The son is the one who has to appoint the shliach. The Gemara in Kedushin talks about the following scenario. Let's say a son goes to the father and says, Dad, the time has come. I really want to get married. The father said, but you're only 14 years old. The father said, no, I don't think it's a good idea. The son says, I want to get married. It's time. So the son is now expressing his desire to get married. Could the father then go ahead and marry off the son to anybody? And the answer is yes. If the son reveals that he would like to get married, then I have a question for you. Let's say I know a guy, and I see he's a single guy, and I feel it's good for him to get married. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a shadchan, and I'm going to say, you have any girls for him? And he said, yeah, here's the list. I say, yeah, the third one. And I go over to that girl, and I hand her a ring on behalf of Yankel, and Yankel doesn't know about it. Can I marry off Yankel to somebody without his permission? Yes or no? No. I have a question. What if I'm walking down the street and I see a diamond ring and I say, wow, Yankel would really like this $10,000 ring. Can I pick it up and be koineh it for Yankel? Yeah. What is that called? When I pick something up and I'm koineh it for someone else without their knowledge? Zechia. The Gemara says, Zechia mitam shlichos. What does that mean, Zechia mitam shlichos? When something is good for someone, we have what we call an anan sadi. It's obvious that he would have appointed me to pick it up for him. So if it's obvious that it's good for him, I can act as his agent on his behalf without his permission. But I cannot act as someone's agent on their behalf to marry them to a woman because it's not necessarily good, objectively, in all ways, to be married. Or some people think that, or some people may not want to be married. So I have no right to act as someone shliach l'kedushin without their consent and permission. But that's under normal circumstances. But what if a kid says, or somebody says, I want to get married? Let's say a guy puts up a sign in the front door of BRS, Maidal Rabbim, public notice, I want to get married. Can I then go ahead and hand a ring to a woman for that guy? Yes. Yeah? The only reason I can't do it is because we don't know that he wants to get married. But if he tells us he wants to get married, I can then marry him off to someone. One second. I could marry him off to somebody. Now, why?
The fact that he wants to get married doesn't mean he wants that wife. She might not be a diamond. She might be a very rock.
Okay, true. But let's establish the following principle. If he says he wants to get married, I can act as his shliach. Let's say he tells me, let's say somebody comes over to you and says, do me a favor, I want to get married. You could go marry him off. Does he reserve the right, upon seeing the woman that you've come up with, to say, no, that's not what I had in mind? We have one Gemara in Shas that could be cited as a source, what the halacha is in a certain circumstance. The halacha is, the Gemara in Bava Metzia says, in Elam Metzias, right in the beginning of Elam Metzias, if you appoint a shliach, say, hey pal, I have a field with 500 acres, I'm too lazy to take off truma myself, go take off truma for me. Now there are three options if somebody takes off truma. You could take truma from good stuff, from mediocre stuff, from bad stuff. Let's say the shliach goes, again, because the only instructions he was given is, take off truma for me. So let's say the shliach goes, and the mishaleach says, no, what's wrong with you? Why do you give my very best stuff? Is the truma effective or not effective? It's not effective. What do you mean? But he asked him to take it off. Yeah, but he didn't give him specific instructions, so the mishaleach reserves the right to say, no, that's not what I had in mind. But what if the mishaleach comes and says, oh, you gave this? You should even give more. Good job. Is it effective? It's effective. Therefore, the Sefer Darkei Shalom suggests the following. There is no concept in Judaism that a father could appoint a shliach to marry off his son. It must be that Avram and Yitzchak had word with each other, and Yitzchak said, hey dad, I'm 40 years old, it's time to get married. I need to get married. Now, once Avram hears the magic words, it's time to get married, then anyone could be a shliach for Eliezer, for Yitzchak. But ultimately, Yitzchak reserves the right to approve of the shidduch. So Eliezer is the shidduch of who? Is the shliach of who? Yitzchak. Based on what? Based on Yitzchak must have expressed his desire to get married, and I could have been a shliach, you could have been a shliach. The only one available to do this was Eliezer. So Avram Avinu frees him on condition that he finds a wife for Yitzchak. But that kedushin that Eliezer effectuated back in Aram Naharayim is what we call hanging in midair. And it's going to depend on when Yitzchak finally meets the girl, if he says, good job, or get lost. So what happened is Eliezer is freed conditionally. Is Yitzchak violating the principle that you're not allowed to get married until you see the woman? He's not violating it, because ultimately he reserves the right to look at her and see if he's happy with what he got. Is Yitzchak violating the principle that you're not allowed to appoint a shliach undesignated and unspecified? No. Because in general, you're not allowed to appoint a shliach and tell the shliach, go marry me to any woman because the shliach might die and now you're stuck, you can't marry anyone. But in this circumstance, where Yitzchak reserves the right to say, no, I don't want this, if Eliezer dies and now Yitzchak's stuck in a situation where he'll become usher to the whole world, Yitzchak could say, no, I never appointed you for this. You see, once Yitzchak reserves the right to, so to speak, undermine the appointment of the shlichos, there's no violation of he never saw her. There's no violation of you're not allowed to appoint a shliach stam. In terms of who appointed Eliezer, Yitzchak did, but he never told him, he did. Once he revealed that he wants to get married, anyone could act on his behalf. And in terms of why the Torah says, Va'yikach, he did the kedushin. Didn't the kedushin already take place? It's not formalized until he gives the approval. So the kedushin, so to speak, is not absolutely chal until Yitzchak gives the approval. All of this is just to open up our minds to think about how the various halachic principles apply to this great story in Parshas Chayei that we're going to be reading this Shabbos. If he says no, it's a bracha levatala. So Rav Shalom Schechter does end off with that question: how could Eliezer make berachas erusin if ultimately it's not? I would say it's not a bracha levatala. You know why? Because if he says no, then Eliezer was never freed. And if Eliezer was freed, he's not Jewish. If you're not Jewish, there's no issur of bracha levatala.